At 2:17 a.m., sleet tapped against the emergency entrance like handfuls of gravel, and Ava Kim stood under the flickering awning outside St. Bridget's, with her shoulders locked from 14 hours of translating other people's fear. Her scrub top was still damp at the collar where a frightened mother had gripped her during triage, and her shoes made a soft, wet sound each time she shifted her weight. She opened her wallet with fingers that had started to tremble from hunger and cold and counted the bills twice under the sodium light. $74. 3 20s, 110, 4 ones. She slid the money into a separate pocket, then unfolded the 3 notices she had been avoiding since Monday. Rent past due, electric final warning, legal retainer reminder in language so polite it felt cruel. Her stomach pinched hard enough to make her lean against the brick wall and close her eyes for one steadying breath. Inside, a security guard she knew by face nodded as she came back through the side hall to clock out. "You good, Ms. Kim?" "Just tired," she said, because tired was cleaner than hungry, cleaner than panicked, cleaner than saying I translated 6 consent forms tonight and signed none for my own life. She pushed her badge into the return tray, checked her phone, and found 2 missed calls from her brother's caseworker and 1 voicemail from a clinic billing office. No new message from the family court clerk. No update on the hearing that might bring Jonah home. The silence sat heavier than any bad news. By 2:41, she was downtown in the back seat of a rideshare she had no business paying for, crossing wet avenues where neon bled across the pavement and steam rose from manhole covers like the city itself was trying to exhale. She rested her forehead against the glass, counting expenses the way she translated pain scales at work. Rent, legal fees, food, Metro card, inhaler refill for a child who was not hers, but who trusted her enough to sleep when she was in the room. The arithmetic never resolved, it only rearranged the damage. Her reflection looked older in the window than it had at the start of winter. Eyes shadowed, mouth set, hair escaping the knot she had twisted up at dawn. At a red light, she pressed her palm to her sternum until the tightness loosened. The Pellegrini building rose out of the rain in polished stone and guarded quiet, all controlled heat and soft lighting, and men at the door who wore tailored coats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She used the service entrance and gave her name to the night desk. The clerk scanned the roster, nodded, and handed back her ID without looking surprised to see her arrive in wet hospital scrubs at this hour. Protocol was the point here. Predictability was mercy. The private elevator hummed upward through floors she had never seen, carrying her from antiseptic fluorescent exhaustion into marble floors that reflected crystal light like still water. She rolled her shoulders once, smoothed her sleeves, and stepped out already rewriting her face into neutral competence. In the family wing, the nursery monitor glowed a soft blue on the console table. Bianca Pellegrini, 7 years old and all narrow shoulders and serious eyes, had fallen asleep with a stuffed fox under her arm and her nebulizer mask tilted to one side. Ava moved quietly to adjust it, checked the pulse oximeter reading, and listened to the child breathe. Inhale. Pause. Exhale with a slight whistle at the tail end. Not dangerous, just tight. Ava documented the reading in the overnight chart, then lowered herself into the armchair beside the bed and rubbed her calves through damp fabric. The ache settled deep in her bones, familiar as language. "Miss Ava." Bianca's eyes opened to slits, voice rough with sleep. "I'm here," Ava whispered. "You smell like rain." "I did bring a lot of weather in with me." Bianca gave the ghost of a smile. "Did my uncle come home?" "Not yet." "Will you stay until morning?" "Yes." She tucked the blanket higher around the girl's shoulders. "Sleep. I'll be right here." Bianca's fingers found the stuffed fox again. "You always say that." "And I always mean it." When the child drifted off, Ava looked at the little silver ring of moisture left by the nebulizer cup on the nightstand and thought about promises. Promises to children were simple if you kept your body in one place. Promises to courts, landlords, and debt collectors asked for proof she never seemed to have, in the right format at the right time. At 3:18, a text arrived from Mina, the one friend who still called her after midnight without apology. "You alive?" Ava typed back, "Working." Mina replied with a photo of a vending machine granola bar and the caption, "Luxury dinner." Ava almost laughed, then typed, "Tell me your shift ended at least." Mina, 40 minutes ago. Eat something. Don't pretend coffee is a meal." Ava looked at the untouched tea service on the sideboard. Immaculate china and a covered plate of sliced pears from earlier. And then, at the protein bar she had been carrying in her pocket since noon, now crushed flat. She ate it in 3 slow bites while charting Bianca's 3:30 check and trying not to think about how quickly hunger could turn into anger when you were this tired. A little after 4, the household manager, Mrs. Corbett, stepped into the doorway with a tablet and an expression that stayed perfectly composed, even when it bordered on disapproval. "Ms. Kim, there was vintage Bordeaux left in the small salon after tonight's reception. If Mr. Pellegrini asks, please note it was from the 1997 lot, not 1998. The labels are similar." Ava kept her eyes on the chart for one beat, then looked up. 1997. Understood. Mrs. Corbett's gaze dropped to Ava's damp sleeve, then back to her face. "And pronunciation matters with guests. It's Bordeaux, softer at the end." Ava felt heat rise under her skin, despite the chill still trapped in her clothes. "Thank you." The manager inclined her head and left, heels silent on thick carpet. The correction was small, clinical, almost generous on paper. It still landed like a hand, pressing her lower. She had learned to swallow moments like that, without expression. Last month, at a fundraising dinner, she had not been invited to, but still had to cross in order to reach Bianca's wing. A woman in diamonds and a pale suit had paused mid-sentence and asked Mrs. Corbett in Ava's hearing, "Are girls like her screened for theft?" As if Ava were not standing there with a medication tray and a documented medication administration record that could survive legal scrutiny. As if skill erased itself when your shoes were practical and your accent changed shape depending on who needed reassurance. Mrs. Corbett had answered, "All staff are vetted," and resumed the conversation without looking at Ava. Ava had continued down the corridor at the same pace, each step measured, chin level, the tray steady in her hands. At 4:52, the private elevator chimed once. She heard low male voices from the outer hall, then the click of a door and silence. She did not go out. She reviewed Bianca's emergency action plan again instead. Trigger list, inhaler schedule, backup nebulizer settings, attending physician number, on-call respiratory specialist. Procedures were a language nobody mocked because they worked when panic made speech useless. She checked the rescue inhaler expiration date and replaced it with a fresh one from the locked cabinet, logging the swap with precise pen strokes. At 5:11, she finally stood to stretch, and pain flared up her back so sharply she braced a hand on the armchair until it eased. Her phone vibrated again, this time with a voicemail transcript from the caseworker's office. "Please contact us regarding administrative delay on transfer review." That term. She repeated it in her head until it lost meaning. Jonah had been moved twice in 6 months because of paperwork and staffing rotations, and one foster family that changed counties with 10 days' notice. It meant another week. It meant another round of signatures. It meant one more conversation where she had to sound calm while requesting what should have happened already. She opened the legal notice in her email and read the number due by Friday. Her throat tightened, and for a moment the room blurred at the edges. A soft knock sounded at the half-open door. One of the night security officers, Reyes, stood in the hall with a paper cup in his hand. "Kitchen brewed a fresh pot. You looked like you were about to fall over." She accepted the cup with both hands, grateful for the heat. "Thank you." He gave a quick nod toward Bianca's room. "All quiet?" "All quiet." "Good." He hesitated, then added, "You keep this place steadier than most people in suits." When he walked away, Ava stared at the lid of the cup until steam clouded her vision. The compliment should have helped. Instead, it made her chest ache because being steady had become her entire identity and still never bought margin. By 6, the sleet had thinned to cold rain, streaking the glass. Dawn began to lift a gray line over the river, and the penthouse shifted from night hush to morning machinery. Kitchen staff arrival, low voices on headsets, doors opening and closing with practiced discretion. Ava completed Bianca's final overnight charting, prepared the morning inhaler dose, and laid out the child's school sweater at the foot of the bed, even though she did not know if school would happen after a late breathing episode. Her hands moved on habit. Her mind stayed on numbers. $74, 3 overdue notices, 1 delayed custody review. The stack of realities sat like weight on her sternum, pressing down, steady and relentless. At 6:23, she stepped into the staff corridor to wash her hands, catching her reflection in a narrow mirror between 2 framed prints. Damp hair escaping, scrub pants creased, eyes ringed dark, posture still straight because collapse was a luxury scheduled for later. She reached into her pocket for lip balm and found the folded notices again instead. Edges softened from handling. Rent, electric, legal. She held them for a beat, then slid them back, squared her shoulders, and returned to Bianca's room, just as the child stirred awake. Because whatever else her life was becoming, this hour still belonged to responsibility. Bianca blinked against the pale morning light, hair flattened on one side, lashes still clumped with sleep. And Ava was already at her bedside with the inhaler spacer in one hand and a glass of water in the other. The child's first breath caught high and thin, then settled after 2 measured puffs, and Ava counted silently with her fingers the way the respiratory therapist had taught her. 1, 2, 3. Hold. Exhale. Bianca's shoulders dropped. "School?" Bianca asked, voice scratchy. "We decide after breakfast," Ava said. "No heroics today." Bianca gave her a small, offended look that dissolved into a yawn. Ava helped her sit up, checked for wheeze at the base of the lungs, then reached for the chart at the foot of the bed and logged the time. Her pen left a tiny ink smear where her hand still shook from caffeine and too little sleep. By 6:40, the family wing had warmed into motion. Someone in the kitchen was whisking eggs hard enough for metal to ring against a bowl. A vacuum hummed and stopped. Headsets crackled in short-coded phrases at the end of the corridor. Ava guided Bianca through socks, sweater, hair tie, morning meds, and watched the girl's face shift from fogged to alert in increments. Routine mattered because it let fear stay abstract. It should have stayed there. At 6:56, Mrs. Corbett appeared again at the nursery threshold in a navy dress with a white collar, tablet tucked to her chest like a clipboard in a courtroom. "Ms. Kim, a minor change in schedule. Mr. Pellegrini will take breakfast with guests in the East Salon. Bianca is expected to greet them for 10 minutes. Bianca's fingers tightened around her spoon. "Do I have to?" Mrs. Corbett's smile was practiced and thin. "Only if you feel strong enough, darling. We do not disappoint family friends if it can be avoided." Ava heard the pressure under the softened wording and felt Bianca hear it too. There was a brief constriction around 2, resolved with nebulizer. "She's been stable overnight since," Ava said, keeping her tone even. 10 minutes is manageable if there are no fragrances and no crowding. Mrs. Corbett's eyes moved to Ava, then to the chart in her hand, then back to Ava's face with polite neutrality. "The room has already been arranged. Please ensure she appears presentable." Presentable. Ava swallowed the first reply that rose and tasted like exhaustion. "I'll bring her at 7:10 and stay within arm's reach. Try not to hover." Mrs. Corbett glanced at Ava's scrub top, now wrinkled and dry stiff at the shoulders. "And perhaps change before entering the salon. We have donors from last night still in residence." The words were measured, but the meaning landed clear. "Do not bring your hospital night into our morning optics." Ava nodded once. "Understood." After Mrs. Corbett left, Bianca pushed scrambled eggs around her plate and whispered, "I don't like when she talks like that." Ava crouched so they were eye level. "She talks like she runs trains. Everything on time, everything in the right place." "I'm not a train." "No." Ava smoothed the child's hair back from her forehead. "You're a person. That matters more, even when people forget." Bianca stared at her for a beat too long, then gave a solemn nod and took 2 real bites to prove cooperation. Ava used the next 4 minutes to change in the staff restroom into a black blouse she kept folded in her locker for emergency formality, then returned to find Bianca waiting by the door, with her stuffed fox tucked under one arm like a legal right nobody had authority to remove. The East Salon looked like a magazine spread built to erase hunger. Crystal caught the rain light in pale shards. Silver lids lifted from warm dishes. A wall of windows framed the river as if weather had been invited to perform. Men in tailored suits stood with coffee cups and low voices, and 2 women in cream and pearl occupied the central seating area, their posture saying old money without requiring a single introduction. Luca Pellegrini stood near the fireplace, jacket off, charcoal shirt open at the throat, one hand resting on the back of a chair as he listened to a gray-haired man finish a point. He did not interrupt. He did not fill silence. He absorbed it until everyone else adjusted around him. When Bianca entered, his gaze shifted first to her breathing, then to Ava's face, quick and precise. "Good morning," he said to his niece, voice low enough to ease instead of command. "Morning, Uncle Luca." He touched Bianca's shoulder once, then looked to Ava. "Any overnight incidents?" "Brief constriction around 2, resolved with nebulizer, stable overnight since." She handed him the printed update and watched him actually read it, not skim. "Thank you." His eyes lifted, dark and steady. "You should eat." Before Ava could answer, one of the women in pearl turned toward Bianca with a bright, social smile that did not reach her eyes. "There she is. And this is your nurse?" "Caregiver," Ava said, before Bianca could be corrected for her. The woman tilted her head. "Of course. You're the translator too, yes? Remarkable what this city does with staffing shortages." She looked briefly to her companion, then back to Ava. "Your English is excellent. Where did you learn to soften your accent?" The room did not go silent, but it narrowed. Ava felt each word like a fingertip pressed into a bruise. "Here," she said, "and at work." "How industrious." The woman lifted her cup. "Mrs. Corbett says you're very useful with the hospital population." Useful. Population. The labels stacked neatly, antiseptic and dehumanizing in equal measure. Ava kept her shoulders level and turned to Bianca. 2 minutes, then we go." The woman in pearl laughed lightly. Strict, too. Mr. Pellegrini, you run an efficient house. Luca set down his espresso cup with a soft click. I run a safe one, he said, still looking at Ava. Ms. Kim decides medical timing, not guests. The correction was clean, no raised volume, no public spectacle. But it shifted the air enough that the woman's smile stiffened. She pivoted into weather talk with someone else. Bianca exhaled like she had been holding breath through the entire exchange. Ava guided her to the window seat, checked pulse with 2 fingers at her wrist, and kept her body between the child and the cluster of perfume and polished laughter in the center of the room. Luca resumed his conversation with the gray-haired man. But twice in the next few minutes, Ava caught him scanning the room in measured arcs, tracking entrances, exits, faces, hands. A room-silencing man, with the habits of someone who expected trouble to wear a suit before it carried a weapon. At 7:13, she brought Bianca back toward the family wing. In the corridor, Bianca tugged her sleeve and whispered, "Did I do okay?" "You did excellent," Ava said. "Now you get 10 minutes of cartoons while I call your doctor." That earned a tiny grin. She settled the child on the bed, with the stuffed fox and remote, confirmed breathing rate, and stepped into the hall to place the call. The specialist's office answered on the 3rd ring, adjusted Bianca's afternoon dose, and asked for updated oxygen logs by noon. Ava wrote everything down in tight, slanted script on the back of a blank requisition sheet because she could not find her notebook fast enough. When she turned the corner toward the service elevator to scan and send the logs, a valet she recognized only as Thomas was standing near the linen cart with his phone pressed to his ear. He looked wrong immediately. His hands shook so hard the cufflinks on his sleeve clicked against each other in a rapid, metallic rhythm. His "yes, sir" came out twice, the second one thinner than the first, and he cut the call when he noticed Ava watching. "You all right?" she asked. He blinked too quickly. "Fine, just cold." The corridor was warm, almost stuffy from radiator heat. Ava glanced at the droplets on his coat shoulders, then at his face. His jaw worked once, as if he were chewing words he had decided not to say. "If you're sick, you should tell someone," she said. "Can't." He forced a smile that didn't hold. "Busy morning." He pushed the linen cart past her and took the wrong turn toward private offices before correcting himself at the intersection, wheels clipping the baseboard hard enough to leave a black streak. Ava watched him go until he disappeared through the service door. At 7:26, rain intensified against the high windows, a harder percussion that turned the building's quiet into something taut. Ava sent the oxygen logs from the staff station, then checked her phone. 2 more missed calls from the caseworker's number. No voicemail this time. She started to dial back, but Mrs. Corbett's assistant appeared with a request for translation support downstairs, where a kitchen vendor had arrived without proper paperwork. Ava almost said no. Then she thought of legal fees, thought of needing every paid minute, and said yes. The service corridor to the loading bay smelled of wet wool, bleach, and coffee grounds. Halfway down, she caught a thread of cologne that stopped her mid-step. Sharp cedar layered over citrus and the faint metallic note of expensive atomizers. Her throat tightened before her mind named it. Kieran had worn that scent in court, in restaurants, in the hallway outside their old apartment, always 5 minutes before a scene that ended with apologies shaped like threats. Ava stood still until the smell thinned into stale air, then kept walking, because the alternative was panic, and she had no time budget for panic. The vendor dispute took 11 minutes and 2 phone calls. Wrong invoice, wrong delivery code, wrong side of the building. She translated between a furious chef and a Dominican driver who had been awake since 3. And by the end, both men looked embarrassed, which meant the crisis had dissolved into administrative friction. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt watched. On her way back up, the private elevator paused unexpectedly at a sub-level floor she did not have clearance to access. The doors opened a hand's width, then closed again without anyone entering. Mechanical glitch, she told herself. Old building, heavy traffic, rain. Her pulse refused the explanation. By 7:49, Bianca was laughing at a cartoon in the nursery, the sound bright and ordinary. Ava stood in the adjoining dressing room sorting fresh towels when she heard it. A faint scrape from the unused side door that connected the nursery suite to a storage closet. Not loud, not dramatic. Just wood against frame, pause, then stillness. She set the towels down and moved toward the door, each step careful. "Hello," she called, voice low. No answer. She opened the door fast and flicked on the light. Shelves, extra bedding, 2 air purifiers in boxes, a stack of unopened board games from last winter. No one. She stayed there long enough to hear her own heartbeat recede. Then she checked the latch, found it unseated by a millimeter, and fixed it with her thumb until it clicked. As she turned back, she noticed the hallway camera above the nursery entrance angled 2 degrees off-center, enough that half the side door fell outside frame. A maintenance issue could do that. A careless hand could do that. A deliberate one could do that too. At 8:03, she documented the camera angle in the incident log at the staff desk and requested review from security, attaching her name and badge number, because anonymous concerns vanished in large houses. Reyes acknowledged the request in person 5 minutes later, expression sharpening when she described the latch and scrape. "I'll pull footage," he said. "Don't mention it outside security." "I wasn't planning to." He lowered his voice. "And stay in family wing unless dispatched." Ava nodded. Understood. He left at a near jog, one hand already to his earpiece. Ava stood with her palm on the desk edge, steadying herself, and told her body to quiet down. She made tea for Bianca, checked the inhaler spacer again, and forced her breathing to match the child's cartoon rhythm from the next room. Predictable, cyclical, harmless. At 8:17, she went to her locker for the notebook she had misplaced. When she opened the metal door, a folded white square slid out and landed against her shoe. No name on the outside, no letterhead, just clean paper bent twice. Her fingers went cold as she picked it up and unfolded the single line written in neat black ink. "You still owe me, Ava. You." The paper trembled in her hand once, then went still because she locked her fingers around it hard enough to hurt. The locker corridor was too bright. Fluorescent light flattening every shadow, turning the single sentence into something clinical instead of personal. "You still owe me, Ava." Her pulse hammered at the base of her throat in an old rhythm her body remembered from another apartment, another hallway. Another man who smiled in public and counted her breaths in private. She folded the note exactly along the existing crease and slid it into the clear medication bag she carried for spare nebulizer masks. Plastic crackled. Evidence, she told herself, not panic. She shut the locker and stared at the dented metal door until the urge to run burned itself down to something useful. Then she took out her phone and called Reyes. He answered on the second ring. "Kim?" "I found a written threat in my locker," she said, voice low and even through effort. "Handwritten, no envelope. I bagged it." A short silence followed, and she could hear him moving fast, shoes striking tile. "Stay where you are. I need to get back to Bianca. I'm coming to you now. 2 minutes." It took 1 minute and 19 seconds. She counted. Reyes rounded the corner with another guard behind him, both in dark suits with earpieces and rain still damp at the shoulders. He did not ask to see the note immediately. He looked at her hands first, then her face, then the corridor camera. Anyone in here with you? No. Did anyone see you open the locker? I don't know. He held out a gloved hand, and she gave him the bag. His jaw tightened as he read the line. Then he passed it to the second guard. Chain of custody bag. Log it. No handling beyond forensics. Pull camera footage from this hall, service stairwell, and staff entrance between 7:30 and 8:20. The second guard nodded and left at a run. Reyes turned back to Ava. You said you smelled someone familiar earlier. She nodded. Cedar Citrus Cologne, same as my ex. Name? Kieran Voss. Reyes's expression shifted by a degree, enough to show recognition of risk, if not of the man himself. I want exact timeline. Start with the valet. Ava gave it to him in clipped segments, minute by minute. Thomas with shaking hands near linen cart, wrong turn, heavy rain, vendor call, elevator pause at sublevel, scrape at side door, camera misalignment. Then this note. She heard how precise she sounded and felt none of the steadiness implied by it. By 8:31, Reyes had her statement typed and read back to her in the security office, a glass-walled room off the service corridor where monitors showed tiled views of entrances, elevators, loading bays, and the river-facing driveway. The note sat inside a larger evidence pouch with a barcode sticker and timestamp. The sight of the barcode steadied her more than any reassurance could have. Do you want Mr. Pellegrini notified now? Reyes asked. The question hit like ice water. Luca would act. That was never in doubt. Action around him had weight and speed and consequences that rolled outward. She saw Bianca's morning breathing chart in her mind, saw Jonah's delayed custody file, saw every fragile process held together by signatures and timing. No, she said too quickly, then corrected, not yet. Let me finish my shift with Bianca and keep this contained to security for the next few hours. Reyes held her gaze for a beat. This is not a routine incident. I know. Then hear me clearly. Contained doesn't mean ignored. I'm elevating this to chief security regardless of notification preference. That's fair. His tone softened by a fraction. You're doing the right things. Stay in family wing. Use panic key if anyone approaches you outside protocol. He placed a small black fob in her palm. One button, no labels. She slipped it into her pocket and returned to Bianca with her face rebuilt into calm. The child was coloring at the small table by the window, tongue caught at one corner of her mouth in concentration. Blue fox? Red umbrella? Green shoes that matched nothing else. Ava knelt beside her and asked about the drawing, listened seriously to the answer, checked breathing sounds, set out lunch, documented meds, answered 3 calls from the doctor's office, and did not let her hands shake again until she was alone in the bathroom at 12:14, pressing cold water against her wrists and counting tiles. 3 days had passed since the court clerk promised a transfer update, and at 1:05 p.m. the caseworker finally called back while Ava was restocking Bianca's inhaler tray. Ms. Kim, I can confirm your brother's review packet was flagged for administrative discrepancy, the woman said in an exhausted voice that suggested 10 similar calls before lunch. We need resubmission of guardianship support documents. Again. Ava stared at the lined-up medication cups and felt her throat close. Flagged by whom? I don't have that note. Just that there was a duplicate filing and a hold. Can you email me the hold code and source terminal? A pause. Most family members don't ask for that. I'm asking. Another pause, keyboard clicks, then, I can send what's visible. Give me 10 minutes. When the call ended, Ava stood very still, then photographed the caller ID, logged the time, and forwarded both to the email Reyes had given her with the subject line, "Possible linkage to written threat." She attached nothing else, no speculation, only facts. By late afternoon, the penthouse shifted into event mode. Florists arrived with white lilies and eucalyptus in crates that smelled green and expensive. Catering staff rolled in polished carts under linen covers. Crystal glasses appeared in perfect ranks on mirrored trays. A charity reception had been scheduled for weeks, Mrs. Corbett said, and no change had been authorized. Protocol continues. Optics continue. The machine continues, even when danger slipped notes under staff lockers. At 5:42, Mrs. Corbett found Ava in the nursery preparing Bianca's evening nebulizer and informed her, with impeccable politeness, that she was expected in the East Salon at 7 to assist with translation for 2 visiting donors and remain discreetly available for Bianca's respiratory monitoring during greetings. "This is a security concern day," Ava said quietly. "I should stay in the wing." "Security has made accommodations. Mr. Pellegrini has not canceled the event." Mrs. Corbett's gaze moved to the nebulizer tubing in Ava's hand. "You are part of the care plan. Please dress accordingly." The old humiliation rose first, then anger. Ava set the tubing down carefully. "I will do medical coverage. I won't do decorative staffing." Mrs. Corbett's chin lifted. "No one asked you to." The lie was elegant and immediate. Ava let it pass because Bianca was within earshot and listening to every adult tone as if it were weather. 7 o'clock, she said. At 6:51, she stood in the service pantry in a dark blouse and black slacks, pressing concealer over the faint half-moon marks blooming at her wrist from gripping her own hand too hard earlier. She checked the panic fob, checked her phone battery, checked the covert recording app Mina once forced her to install after a bad night outside family court. A simple tool with one red button and automatic cloud backup. She had never used it for anything except test clips of rain and subway noise. Her thumb hovered over the icon now, then moved away. Not yet. At 7:08, the East Salon glowed under chandelier light, all marble reflections and low strings from a hidden speaker system. Rain streaked the windows in silver lines. Guests moved through the room in tailored suits and muted jewelry, voices pitched for influence rather than volume. Ava stayed near Bianca in the inhaler bag, tracking breathing rate by instinct while translating occasional questions for an older woman from Buenos Aires, whose English slipped under stress. Normal tasks. Useful tasks. Her pulse still ran high. Luca stood near the long bar in a black suit that looked cut from shadow, speaking with 2 board members and a judge whose face Ava recognized from courthouse hallways. He looked composed, watchful, untouched by the room's theater. Twice his gaze found Ava and moved on only after confirming Bianca looked stable. Room silencing authority, wrapped in stillness. At 7:19, a burst of laughter opened near the entrance, and a man stepped in from the corridor, shrugging rain from an expensive charcoal coat. Broad shoulders, perfectly arranged dark hair, smile calibrated for first impressions. Kieran Voss did not belong on any approved list in this building, and yet he entered as if invited. He had come in on a donor's arm with a forged foundation credential, waved through at the inner checkpoint before the morning watch list update finished propagating to event access tablets. At the far door, one guard touched his earpiece and stiffened, recognition landing seconds too late. Ava's skin went cold. He took his time crossing the room, pausing to shake hands with a donor she recognized from morning coverage, trading pleasantries with effortless charm. Public Kieran had always been polished, never hurried, never visibly angry. He reached Ava with a glass of sparkling water in one hand and that familiar cedar citrus scent preceding him like an old threat. "Ava," he said, smile widening for anyone watching. "You look exhausted." She kept her voice flat. "You need to leave." A woman beside them turned slightly, curious. Kieran's smile sharpened. "Still that charity job accent? It comes out more when you're frightened." Heat crawled up Ava's neck. She saw Bianca 10 feet away with Mrs. Corbett, reaching for her fox plush and glancing toward the raised voices. Ava took one step sideways, trying to block Kieran's line of sight to the child. "Do not speak to me here. I'm being polite." He leaned in as if to kiss her cheek, and his hand closed around her wrist beneath the tray linen draped over her arm. The grip was precise, punishing, hidden from the room. Pain shot up to her elbow. She did not gasp. She had learned the cost of giving him that. His mouth stayed curved in a social smile, while his voice dropped to a murmur only she could hear. "You sign access to Pellegrini's private schedule by morning. Gate codes, travel manifests, school route, all of it." Her heart slammed hard enough to blur the edges of the chandelier light. "No." His fingers tightened once. "Then your brother's custody file disappears into processing gaps, and accidents happen at airports. Fragile places, airports, so many exits." For one thin second, she froze. Old fear flooding muscle memory so fast, her knees went weak. The salon sounds flattened into one long hum. Crystal, laughter, rain, strings. Her throat closed, and her body wanted smallness, silence, compliance. Then Bianca coughed, one dry sound from across the room, and the spell broke. Ava shifted her weight and let her tray tilt deliberately. 2 glasses slid and shattered against the marble at their feet, sharp noise cracking the room's polished calm. Heads turned. Kieran's grip loosened on reflex. She pulled free, stepped back, and in the same motion palmed her phone from her pocket and hit record inside the folded linen by her side. "I didn't hear you," she said. Loud enough for nearby guests. Trembling turned into performance. "Could you repeat what you said about my brother and airports?" Kieran's eyes flicked down, assessing. He thought she was panicking. He thought he was steering. "I said family files are delicate," he answered smoothly for the audience. Then, lower, through clenched teeth and that same pleasant smile. "Morning deadline. Schedule access, or you lose him." The app timer started climbing in, red against black. Ava swallowed and pushed further, voice shaking for real now. "You want Pellegrini's travel routes?" His nostrils flared. "Don't be dramatic." She took half a step closer, as if pleading, and angled the phone in the linen toward his mouth. "Say it clearly. I don't understand what you need." "Manifest access," he hissed. "Private and commercial. Do it by 8 a.m. Don't test me." She hit the share shortcut by feel and sent the live clip to Reyes and the family attorney contact in one motion, geotag enabled, timestamp visible. Then she glanced at Kieran's coat, at the inside breast pocket bulging under fine wool. Paper edge, court packet size. She let her hand shake harder and reached as though to steady herself on him, fingers sliding inside the open lapel. He caught her wrist again, but too late. The folded packet came free into her sleeve. Across the room, Luca was moving. She saw him only in fragments through bodies turning toward the broken glass. Black suit cutting a direct line, jaw set, eyes gone colder than the rain on the windows. His voice reached her over the murmur, low and barely contained. "Reyes, lock this floor. Nobody exits." Security shifted instantly. 2 men to the doors, one to Bianca, one to the corridor. Kieran dropped her wrist and stepped back with a practiced look of concern. "She seems unwell," he said to no one in particular, palms open. I was helping. Ava's breath came thin and hard. She forced words through the constriction and held up the packet she had pulled from his coat. "He threatened my brother," she said, louder than she had spoken all day. "He asked for manifests. I recorded it." The room went still in the way only expensive rooms can. Silence thick with witnesses and consequence. Luca stopped at her side, close enough that she felt the heat of him, not touching, not crowding, presence like a wall. "Behind me," he said without looking at her. Then to security, each command a cut of steel. "Isolate Voss in the library. Collect every camera angle from this room and corridor. Council here now. No one deletes anything. Do you understand me?" A chorus answered, "Yes, sir." Kieran's smile flickered for the first time, brief and ugly. He looked past Luca at Ava, and his voice dropped to the tone she knew too well. "You just made a very expensive mistake." Luca turned his head a fraction, eyes fixed on Kieran, voice smooth and devoid of theatrics. "You don't speak to her again." Then Ava felt the bruise on her wrist throb under the chandelier light as security closed in and the doors sealed with a hard, final click. The hard click of the sealed doors echoed through Ava's ribs long after the mechanism stopped moving. Security spread through the salon in practiced lines. One guard at each exit, one at the corridor to the service wing, another already guiding Bianca away with Mrs. Corbett and the inhaler bag. Luca did not raise his voice, but every order landed like a lock turning. "Guest phones stay visible and on the tables," he said. "No calls, no messages, no recordings leave this room until council clears witness statements." A donor in a Navy suit started to object, and Luca cut him off with a glance. "You will have your devices returned. You will also remain in place." Reyes stepped to Ava first. "Miss Kim, are you injured?" My wrist. Her voice scraped. And maybe my palm. I grabbed broken glass. "Medic to East Salon now," Luca said, already turning. "And send Dr. Sethi from the family clinic." Kieran gave a short, disbelieving laugh as 2 guards closed in on him. "This is theater. You're detaining a guest over a misunderstanding." Reyes's jaw tightened. "Sir, you'll come with us." Kieran looked past him, straight at Ava, and smiled the way he used to when he wanted her to doubt her own memory. "Tell them you're overwhelmed, Ava. We can still handle this privately." She felt her stomach drop, then reset. "I have an audio recording and your documents." "Documents," he said, quick enough to sound offended. "I brought a donation pledge." Ava pulled the folded packet from her sleeve and held it high, keeping 2 fingers on one corner so no one could claim contamination. "Reyes, evidence bag. He had this inside his coat when he threatened me." Reyes snapped on gloves, took the packet, and passed it to a younger guard with a barcode pouch. "Chain it now. Camera on this handoff." The younger guard recited into his body cam, voice steady. "Item 1. Recovered packet. Source, Ms. Kim. Recovered from Mr. Voss coat interior. Timestamp 1922. He sealed the bag with a strip that flashed red once when it locked. By 7:24, the library doors had shut behind Kieran and 2 senior security officers, and a 3rd man stood outside, with his hand on the biometric panel. No shouting came through the wood, just silence, expensive and heavy. Ava's knees chose that moment to shake. She hated that timing, hated her own body for waiting until protocol was in place. Luca moved 1/2 step toward her, stopped, and kept his hands at his sides. "Can you stand?" he asked. Yes. Can you walk to the clinic suite? She nodded. Good. Stay with Reyes. The medic arrived with a black trauma case and a folded blanket. Ms. Kim, I need your hand. Her tone was calm, efficient, almost brisk enough to borrow. Ava opened her left hand and saw a thin cut along the base of her thumb she hadn't felt. No deep damage, just a bright line and tiny glass dust caught against skin. The medic irrigated it over a stainless tray, while Ava watched water run pink and then clear. Any dizziness? The medic asked. Not dizzy, just wired. Expected. Luca was still issuing commands behind her. Pull all corridor feeds from 1830 onward. Mirror to offline storage and legal archive. Pull staff access logs for East Checkpoint and donor entry tablets. Reyes answered, already in progress. Flag every manifest request made through our network since midnight. Luca said. Private aviation, commercial bookings, family travel, school transport, freeze outbound approvals. Ava's head turned at that, fast enough to sting her neck. Airports. He had caught the same word she had. He met her eyes for 1 second. He used that threat for a reason. The medic wrapped her palm, then checked her wrist. Bruising had already surfaced in curved shadows where Kieran's fingers had clamped down. Ava flinched when ice touched skin. Sorry, the medic murmured. Hold this there. Ava held it. Her hand looked smaller under the white compress, almost detached from the rest of her. Mrs. Corbett appeared at the clinic doorway with Bianca pressed close to her side, stuffed fox tucked under one arm and nebulizer tubing looped like a necklace. Bianca's eyes found Ava's bandaged hand instantly and widened. Miss Ava. Ava crouched despite the pull in her wrist. I'm okay. Tiny cut. Big drama. Bianca frowned in fierce concentration, then moved forward and put the stuffed fox in Ava's lap like a formal transfer of authority. For bravery. Ava's throat tightened so hard she had to swallow twice. Thank you, B. Luca crossed to his niece and knelt to her level, one knee on polished stone, suit trousers pulling at the seam. You did exactly what you were told, he said quietly. That helped everyone. You understand? Bianca nodded. I stayed with Mrs. Corbett. You did. Now you go with Rosa to the blue room and do one breathing treatment, then cartoons. I want Miss Ava. Luca glanced to Ava, waiting. Ava nodded. I'll come in a few minutes, I promise. Bianca accepted that, reluctantly, and let the house nurse lead her away. Ava watched them until the door closed, because seeing the child exit under supervision let her own pulse step down one notch. Reyes stepped in with a tablet. Initial sweep report. Voss entered on a forged auxiliary donor credential tied to the Bellamy Foundation list. Tablet at Checkpoint 4 hadn't synced the Morning Watch update. Who had that tablet? Luca asked. Valet support at 1903, Thomas Leary. Ava looked up sharply. The one with shaking hands. Reyes nodded once. We pulled him from service. He's in interview room 2. Was he coerced or paid? Luca asked. Unknown. Find out. No force unless legal clears it. Luca's voice stayed level. I want facts that survive court. He turned to Ava. You'll give a formal statement to counsel and police in the secure conference room. Not here, not in front of guests. I can do that now. In 5 minutes, the medic said firmly. Your blood pressure is too high. Sit. Ava almost argued. Then the room tilted very slightly at the edges, not enough to fall, enough to warn. She sat. Luca placed a glass of water on the side table within reach, then stepped back again. No one asks you questions until counsel arrives. If anyone tries, You walk out and call Reyes. Understood. He looked at the medic. She eats first. I can handle a statement without food. That wasn't a suggestion. The command should have irritated her. Instead, it grounded her, because decisive logistics were easier to trust than sympathy. 7 minutes later, a tray arrived from the kitchen. Plain rice, poached chicken, sliced pear, tea without caffeine. Ava stared at it like it belonged to someone else's life. You haven't eaten since morning, Lucas said. How do you know that? I asked. She took one bite to prove compliance, then another because her hands stopped shaking when she did. Outside the clinic suite, footsteps accelerated and receded. Doors opened and sealed. Low voices moved in tactical rhythms. Inside, the medic rechecked her wrist and logged injury photos with timestamp tags for evidentiary use. Reyes returned. Family attorney is 2 minutes out. Police liaison en route, 10 to 12. We have redundant copies of the audio clip from Ms. Kim's share. Metadata intact. Ava exhaled through her teeth. Good. Luca's attention shifted to her with that same assessing stillness he used in crowded rooms. You did exactly what trained witnesses do under pressure. You created corroboration. Because I knew no one would believe me without it. I believed you when you spoke. Belief isn't admissible. A shadow crossed his expression, brief and controlled. No, it isn't. He checked his phone, then handed it to Reyes. Call operations. All airport contacts on priority list. Confirm no travel request can be submitted under Ava Kim, Jonah Kim, or any known alias tied to Voss's filing pattern. If there's a reservation in queue, freeze and flag. Ava blinked. You can do that this fast? I can ask this fast, he said, and people answer. The old class contrast landed with force. Her months of unanswered forms against his one call that moved systems. It stung, and it helped. Both true at once. By 7:46, the secure conference room had been cleared for statements, and the salon guests were being released in staggered groups after signing witness acknowledgments. Ava walked there with Reyes on one side and the medic trailing with her chart. Luca did not enter at first. He stood outside the glass wall, taking 2 calls in clipped phrases that sounded like coordinates more than conversation. Inside, the family attorney, Naomi Price, opened a legal pad and met Ava with direct eyes. We'll do this cleanly. You speak in sequence. If you're uncertain, you say uncertain. If you remember exactly, you give exact language. Ava nodded and began. Locker note, cologne, camera angle, Kieran's approach, his words, her recording, the packet retrieval. She gave timestamps wherever she had them and marked where she inferred rather than knew. Naomi interrupted only to clarify names and confirm chain of custody transfers. When Ava finished, Naomi slid a box of tissues toward her. Ava hadn't realized tears had started. Your statement is strong, Naomi said. More important, it is supported. We have audio, video, witness presence, physical evidence, and procedural logs. He can't smile this away. Ava let that sentence settle. Couldn't smile this away. She had waited years to hear any version of it. When she stepped back into the corridor, Luca was there, jacket off now, sleeves rolled to mid-forearm. A pale scar traced across his right wrist, old and clean, visible only because the cuff had shifted. Ava had never noticed it before. He saw her looking and said, Conference room 2 is ready for me. 5 minutes. She should have gone to Bianca. She should have rested. Instead, she said, Why airports? He went still. Not defensive, not evasive. Measured. Because he used the right pressure point, he said. and because you heard it in his voice. That's not the whole answer. No. He glanced toward the blue room where Bianca watched cartoons under the house nurse's eye, then back at Ava. My sister Elena was taken during a transfer between private terminals 8 years ago. Not in this city. Not by random men. By people who used forged manifests and hospitality credentials. The corridor noise seemed to recede, each sound farther away than it should have been. Ava kept her breathing even. She survived the first day, he continued, voice low, controlled enough to make each word heavier. She did not survive the week. Bianca was 3 months old. Ava's hand tightened around the fox plush still tucked against her side. She had known there was loss in this family from the way rooms went quiet around certain photographs, but not this shape of it, not this mechanism. "I'm sorry," she said, and the phrase felt too small. "So am I." He looked down the corridor toward the secured library door that held Kieran and all his polished menace. "After that, I built systems. Protocol, redundancies, people who verify everything twice. It keeps children breathing and enemies outside. Most days." The scar on his wrist made new sense. So did the relentless checklists, the insistence on timing, the refusal to improvise when safety was involved. Not control for theater. Control built over grief. Ava swallowed. "I thought you were overreacting when you froze manifests." "I was reacting exactly enough." A beat passed. Fear and strategy can coexist. You proved that tonight. The words landed in her like warmth after cold rain. Not because they were kind, but because they were precise. From the blue room, Bianca's laugh drifted out at a cartoon punchline, light and ordinary and alive. Ava turned toward the sound, then hesitated. "There's something else," she said. "Jonah's custody file was flagged today for duplicate filing from an unknown terminal. Same day I got the threat. Same demand for your schedules. I sent the call log to Reyes. I saw it." Luca's jaw set. "We're subpoenaing the terminal data with counsel. If Voss touched the file, we prove it. If he didn't, then we still get your brother out of that system faster." She looked at him, at the careful distance he kept even now, at the restraint wrapped around force. "Why help me this far?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because a man threatened a child to control you. Because you protected my niece while your own life was under pressure. Because this house owes loyalty where loyalty is given." It was not a declaration. It was a code. Ava nodded once, feeling the ground under her feet come back into focus. The pain in her wrist was still there. The case was not finished. Kieran was still in the building, still dangerous, still capable of damage through systems and smiles. But the room around her had structure now. Evidence logged, contacts activated, child secured, counsel in motion, truth anchored in more than her word alone. Reyes appeared at the far end of the corridor and lifted a hand. "Police liaison is here. They're ready for Mr. Voss transfer and Ms. Kim's supplemental statement." Luca's gaze held Ava's for one steady second. "You choose the order. You go now, or you sit with Bianca first for 5 minutes." Choice, not command. Ava drew one full breath, then handed the stuffed fox to him. "5 minutes with Bianca," she said. "Then I finish this." Ava took the stuffed fox back from Luca at the blue room door and stepped inside with Bianca, closing out the corridor noise to a muted hush. The room smelled like chamomile and clean cotton. The house nurse had already set the nebulizer cup on the side table. And a cartoon fox in a tiny raincoat hopped across the television with cheerful music that felt unreal after the sealed doors and evidence bags. Bianca patted the blanket beside her, and Ava sat, keeping her bandaged hand turned away until the child noticed anyway. "Did that man hurt you?" Bianca asked quietly. "He grabbed too hard," Ava said. She kept her voice level, factual, the way she translated frightening diagnoses into manageable language. "It's a bruise. It will fade." Bianca frowned in fierce concentration. Uncle Luca looked scary. He looked focused. That's his scary. Ava almost smiled, maybe a little. The nebulizer hissed as Bianca settled the mask over her nose and mouth. Ava counted breaths with her, one hand resting lightly on the child's ankle through the blanket. Inhale, hold, slow exhale. Her own breathing still ran too fast. She forced it into Bianca's rhythm until the tremor in her chest loosened. Through the half-open door, she could see Luca standing in the corridor with Reyes, shoulders squared, phone dark in one hand, listening while security gave updates in clipped phrases. Even in stillness, he altered the geometry of the space. A contained force field around everyone he had decided was his responsibility. Bianca lifted the mask for a second. "Are you coming tomorrow?" "Yes," Ava said. "Promise?" Ava's throat tightened for a different reason now. "Promise." The child accepted that and finished the treatment, then leaned over to press the stuffed fox against Ava's bandaged palm as if fabric could knit skin. "For pain," Bianca said. "Fox medicine. Very advanced treatment plan." Bianca gave a solemn nod and glanced toward the doorway. "You can tell Uncle Luca not to stare at the hall. It makes people nervous." Ava followed her gaze. Luca's head was angled toward conference room 2, jaw set, profile cut sharp under the corridor lights. He looked like a man waiting for a door to open on bad news he had already survived once. Attraction sat under Ava's sternum in the same place fear had been all evening, tangled and unwelcome and impossible to separate cleanly. She trusted his logistics. She trusted his speed. She did not yet trust what happened to her own judgment when he stood this close to her life. "I'll mention it," she told Bianca. When the timer chimed, house nurse Rosa took over with practiced gentleness, tucking Bianca in with 2 blankets and a second cartoon queued up. Ava stood, her knees steadier now, and walked back into the corridor. Luca turned immediately, eyes dropping to her face, then her bandage, assessing damage by instinct. 5 minutes, he said. No one came near the blue room. She nodded. Thank you. Police liaison is waiting in the secure conference room. Naomi is still inside. Ava looked toward the glass wall at the end of the hall, and then back at him. I want one condition before I go in. His expression didn't change. Say it. You don't answer for me in there. Not one sentence. She held his gaze. I spent too many years with a man who translated my life into his preferred version. I'm not doing that with anyone else, including you. A muscle moved once in his jaw. I was not planning to. I need to hear you say it clearly. The corridor remained busy around them, footsteps and low radio static moving past. But the space between them narrowed into something charged and private. You speak for yourself, Luca said, voice low. I enforce perimeter. That's the division. Ava exhaled, tension easing by increments. Good. He held her eyes another beat. My condition. She waited. You do not disappear from this building tonight without telling me where you're going. The words landed hard not because they were unreasonable, but because they pressed exactly on the bruise she kept hidden. Her first instinct was resistance. Her second was honesty. I hear control when you say that, she said, and my body treats control like a fire alarm. His voice dropped lower, almost rough. I hear your fear. I also hear a man threatening airports and custody files. I won't pretend those are separate. She looked at him, really looked, at the scar along his wrist and the disciplined restraint wrapped around old grief. I'm not asking you to pretend. Then don't vanish. The attraction she had been ignoring rose sharper, not soft or romantic, but dangerous in its clarity. This man could command a floor of donors into silence, freeze travel networks in minutes, and still wait for her consent before stepping closer. That combination made her want to move toward him and step back at the same time. I won't vanish, she said. I will choose my movements. You will know them. That's the version I can live with. His shoulders loosened by a fraction. Accepted. Reyes approached at a brisk walk. Police ready. Also, Thomas Leary admitted he took a payment to delay tablet sync and passed through one unverified donor credential. He says Voss threatened his sister if he refused. Ava closed her eyes briefly. The trembling hands in the corridor made sense now, ugly and ordinary. Did he name the account? Prepaid transfer through a shell charity, Reyes said. Finances tracing. Get written statement and preserve his phone, Lucas said. No intimidation, counsel present. Reyes nodded and moved off. Ava turned back to Luca. You see why I ask for boundaries? I do. I can't heal inside someone else's command chain. His answer came without pause. Then we build a structure that doesn't require obedience to function. The sentence hit her harder than reassurance would have. Before she could respond, Naomi opened the conference room door and signaled them in. The police liaison introduced herself as Detective Marisol Vega. Calm-eyed, mid-40s, rain still beaded on the shoulders of her plain black coat. She did not perform skepticism or sympathy. She opened her notebook, requested the evidence sequence, and let Ava speak uninterrupted while Naomi tracked timestamps against security logs. Ava described Kieran's exact phrasing, repeated the airport threat verbatim, identified the pressure points he chose. Jonah's custody file, Pellegrini schedules, manifests, school route. When she faltered, she paused and corrected herself instead of filling silence. Detective Vega appreciated that, asked narrow follow-ups, and confirmed receipt of the audio file with metadata intact. We'll want your phone for full forensic image, Vega said. Ava slid it across the table. Take it. Vega looked to Naomi. Chain it now. Naomi sealed the device in a tamper bag, while Reyes logged the transfer on body cam. Physical evidence moved from hand to hand, invisible steps. Locker note, forged packet, event footage archive, phone image request, injury photos. For once, every part of Ava's fear had a form number and a witness signature. When the interview ended, Vega stood. Mr. Voss is being transferred to central booking on extortion and coercion preliminaries tonight, with fraud and attempted kidnapping conspiracy pending review of the packet and manifests request. You may be asked for grand jury testimony later. Ava felt the word later like a distant storm. I'll testify. I expected that, Vega said, and left with the evidence officer. By the time Ava stepped into the corridor again, the building had thinned out. Guests were gone. Crystal cleared, only security and essential staff moving through the late evening hush. At 9:02 p.m., Reyes intercepted them with a clipped update. Transfer team is moving Voss through Service Corridor B to avoid press at the main exit. 1 minute. Ava's pulse spiked. She should have stayed in the blue room. She knew that. Instead, she walked with Luca and Reyes to Corridor B and stopped behind the yellow line security had marked with tape. Moral lines could be legal, procedural, and still need a body to stand at them. Kieran appeared between two officers in plain clothes, wrists cuffed in front, Coat removed, expensive shirt wrinkled at the collar for the first time she had ever seen. He still tried for charm when he saw her, mouth curving into that familiar public smile. "Ava," he said, as if they had met for coffee. "You're overreacting. You know how this works. Charges get negotiated." She did not move. "No, threats get documented." His gaze slid to Luca. "You think this man is different? Same world, better tailoring?" Luca's voice was a low baritone, smooth and stripped of theatrics. "Keep moving." Kieran laughed once, breathy and contemptuous. "She'll run from you too. Women like her always do when they remember who they belong to." The old reflex to shrink rose and died before it reached her shoulders. Ava stepped to the tape line, chin level, and answered him so every officer present could hear. "I don't belong to you. I never did." Her bandaged hand lifted slightly. "Steady now. You touched my brother's file. You threatened a child. You asked for travel manifests to stage harm. This is the last conversation you get with me." His smile cracked at the edges. "You think court will save you. I think records will bury you." He leaned forward against the officer's hold, voice dropping into the tone he used in private hallways. "You ruin me. I take something back." Before he could say another word, Luca stepped into his line of sight, not blocking Ava, but making the hierarchy explicit. Controlled rage sharpened every syllable. "You do not say her name again," Luca said. "You do not reference her brother, my niece, or any route tied to either of them. From this second forward, all contact goes through counsel and the court. Break that boundary and consequences multiply." Kieran sneered. "Possessive now?" "Protective," Luca said. "Legible, enforceable." Detective Vega, arriving behind the transfer team, glanced from Luca to Kieran and then at Ava. "Boundary noted in front of law enforcement. It's in my report." Kieran's composure failed in small, visible fractures. Jaw twitch, nostrils flaring, eyes cutting toward exits that were no longer his. He looked back at Ava one last time and found no opening there. "Move," Vega told the officers. They turned him toward the service elevator. Doors opened, swallowed the group, and closed. The hum of descent faded into the building's mechanical quiet. Ava stayed at the tape line, breathing carefully, waiting for the delayed aftershock. It came as trembling in her knees and heat behind her eyes, but not collapse. Luca stood a step away, close enough to catch her if needed, far enough to leave her space intact. "That line stands now," he said. She nodded. "It stands because it was heard. It stands because you drew it." For a moment, neither spoke. Rain ticked softly against the high windows at the end of the corridor. And somewhere down the hall, Bianca laughed again at the cartoon fox, unaware of legal thresholds and custody files and men escorted in cuffs. Ava let that sound anchor her. Then she turned to Luca, voice hoarse but certain. "I'm going to check on Bianca, call the caseworker back with counsel present, and file my supplemental injury statement before midnight." A faint, grim approval crossed his face. "I'll have Naomi stay for the call. I said I'd choose my movements. And I said you'd know support before you ask for it." A beat passed. "Go! I'll be outside the blue room, not inside it." Trust conflict, attraction, fear, and strategy sat between them in a fragile framework that might hold if both kept their word. Ava picked up the stuffed fox from the chair where she had left it, squared her shoulders, and walked toward the blue room under steady light, while behind her, Luca turned to Reyes and began issuing the next round of orders that would keep the boundary real by morning. Ava found Bianca curled under 2 blankets, fox-themed cartoons still flickering across the wall screen. and sat beside her until the child's breathing settled into the soft, even cadence that meant the bronchodilator had done its work. Rosa checked the pulse oximeter one last time, logged a clean number, and gave Ava a quick nod before dimming the lights. When Ava stepped back into the corridor, the chill from the marble reached through her shoes. Luca was where he said he would be, outside the door, not crossing the threshold. He glanced at her bandaged hand, and then to Naomi, who had already opened a legal folder on the console table. "We make the call now," Naomi said. Speaker on. Recorded with notice. At 9:26 p.m., the caseworker picked up on the fourth ring, weary and defensive, until Naomi identified herself and cited the hold code Ava had requested earlier. The tone changed immediately. Keyboard clicks crackled through the speaker. The duplicate filing originated from a private terminal tied to Bellamy Foundation outreach, the caseworker said. The upload included forged temporary transfer authorization for Jonah Kim. It's now flagged as fraudulent and removed from active review. I'm escalating for emergency judicial protection tonight. Ava closed her eyes for one breath. Can you confirm that in writing before midnight? You'll have the email in 10 minutes, the caseworker said. And Ms. Kim? You were right to ask for source terminal data. Naomi ended the call and looked at Ava. That contact is resolved. We now have a documented attempt to interfere with custody. It strengthens your petition. Reyes arrived at a near jog with a tablet in hand. Operations callback. All outbound manifest requests were frozen at 1938. One attempted access at 1941 from an event tablet routed through a spoofed admin credential. Blocked, logged, preserved. No travel tickets were issued under Ava Kim, Jonah Kim, or any known alias in the fraud packet. Luca gave one short nod. Good. Submit full report to Detective Vega and our Aviation Council. Reyes scrolled. Forensics prelims on physical evidence. Locker note. No usable prints, but pressure pattern and ink composition are consistent with notepad recovered from Voss's briefcase. Forged court packet includes 2 fabricated seals and 1 cloned signature from a retired clerk. Audio clip metadata matches room timestamp and camera angle. East Salon footage, staff hall footage, and service corridor B transfer clips are mirrored to police and sealed archive. Every item accounted for. Ava felt the ground beneath her become less slippery. By 10:03 p.m., they were in conference room 3 with the blinds drawn and only task lighting over the table. Thomas Leary sat at the far end, suit jacket off, hands wrapped around a paper cup he hadn't touched. He looked younger without the valet posture and far more frightened. His eyes lifted once to Ava, then dropped. I took money to delay the tablet's sync, he said, voice shaking. Then they called again and said if I didn't angle the nursery camera and prop the side latch, they'd send photos of my sister's school route. I did the camera. I did the latch. I'm sorry. Ava heard the scrape behind the nursery door in her head and the old spike of terror that had followed it. The elevator pause at sublevel? She asked. Thomas nodded fast. Their runner was waiting there for timing confirmation. I hit the wrong floor because my hands were shaking. You saw me. I thought you already knew. Did you place the locker note? No. A man from the catering load-in did. I only opened the service corridor. Detective Vega, now seated beside Naomi, looked up from her notes. Your full statement is being recorded. Your sister is already under protective watch through witness services. You cooperate fully. You keep that protection. Thomas folded in on himself with relief and shame mixed together. The loaded look in the corridor, the wrong turn, the clipped wheels against the baseboard. None of it had been random. Fear had moved through him the same way it moved through everyone in this house, just with different consequences. At 10:41 p.m., Mrs. Corbett requested a private word in the pantry off the family wing. She stood rigid at first, hands clasped at her waist, pearls still at her throat despite the late hour. "Ms. Kim," she said, each syllable precise, "I spoke to you this morning in ways that prioritized presentation over safety. That was a failure in judgment." Ava waited. "I have submitted a formal procedural correction to Household Operations," Mrs. Corbett continued. "Medical authority now supersedes event protocol without exception. And for what it is worth, the guest who questioned your integrity has been permanently removed from our list." Ava felt surprise before anything else. "Thank you for saying it directly." Mrs. Corbett inclined her head. "You protected this family under pressure. I did not acknowledge that soon enough. It was not warmth, but it was real, and real counted." Near midnight, Naomi received the caseworker's promised email, then a second one from Family Court Intake confirming an emergency hearing slot at 8:30 a.m. Ava reviewed every line before signing the affidavit addendum. Her phone remained in forensic custody, so Naomi printed copies of the audio transcript and incident timeline for court. The panic fob stayed in Ava's pocket. Reyes updated its assignment in the log rather than collecting it, a small practical sign that her safety protocol was now ongoing, not symbolic. In the clinic suite's quiet light at 12:17 a.m., Luca handed Ava a folder and set it down without touching her. "Read before you answer." Inside were 3 notarized documents prepared from templates Naomi had pulled and his legal team had executed within hours. A deed transfer for a secured brownstone in her name only, independent counsel funding under irrevocable trust, and draft language naming joint legal trusteeship support for Jonah with Ava as primary guardian, and Pellegrini counsel barred from unilateral decisions. No fine print trap waited in the margins. Ava read every page twice. Her throat tightened at the precision of it. "You moved very fast." "I move fastest on logistics," he said, "not on feelings." She looked up. "Good. Then hear mine clearly. I don't trade safety for ownership. I don't disappear into someone else's protection plan." His dark gaze held steady. "Accepted. I choose my lawyer. My apartment is mine. Jonah's decisions are mine, with support, not control. Accepted. And if we continue this, whatever this is, it is with consent in every room, every day." His jaw flexed once, controlled. Accepted. Only then did he step closer, slow enough for refusal. Ava didn't step back. His hand rose, paused near her bandaged wrist, and touched only when she nodded. The contact was brief, careful, and almost formal. It still sent a sharp current through her chest. By the second week of May, the emergency hearing had become a full morning in Family Court Part C. Fluorescent lights buzzing over polished benches, while rain tapped the high windows like a memory of the night everything ruptured. Ava testified first, then Detective Vega, then the digital forensics analyst who authenticated the recording, forged packet, and manifest access attempt. Thomas testified under protective order, voice thin but clear. The judge's ruling came in a flat, practical tone that felt more merciful than any dramatic speech. Temporary emergency custody of Jonah Kim is granted to Ava Kim effective immediately, pending final review in 30 days. Fraudulent transfer filings are stricken from record. No contact order against Kieran Voss is entered and expanded to include Jonah Kim and Bianca Pellegrini. Ava sat down slowly, palms cold, and watched Naomi slide the stamped order into a red folder like it was made of glass. The criminal hearing followed that afternoon across the street. Kieran stood in detention gray instead of tailored wool, his old smile reduced to a tight line whenever the prosecutor played the audio clip. Ava's own voice came through the courtroom speakers, steady despite fear, asking him to repeat himself. Then his voice. Manifest access, morning deadline, threats tied to airports and custody. The forged court packet was entered. Camera footage was entered. Chain of custody logs were entered. There was nowhere left for Charm to hide. When he turned during recess and spat, "You think this ends here?" Ava stayed seated and met his eyes without flinching. Luca stood a row behind her, silent until the bailiff moved Kieran forward again. Then, low and even, he said, "You do not say her name again." The bailiff heard it. The court reporter heard it. It entered the record as a boundary, not a performance. 30 days later, just after 6 p.m., Ava unlocked the door of the brownstone for Jonah with a key that stuck once and then turned clean. The place smelled like fresh paint and lemon oil, not marble and polish, and every utility account was in her name. Jonah dropped his backpack in the hall, spun once in the empty living room, and asked if he could put his desk by the front window. Ava said yes and watched him choose a corner like a child relearning permanence. Bianca visited that Saturday with Rosa and a small overnight bag. Asthma meds lined up in a labeled pouch, exactly how Ava had taught the household nurse months earlier. They drew foxes at the kitchen table while Jonah argued cheerfully about takeout menus. At 8:14 p.m., Luca arrived in a dark suit without entourage, left his phone face down on the counter, and asked from the doorway, "May I come in?" Ava looked at the apartment deed framed temporarily above the mantel, then at Jonah laughing with Bianca over uneven pizza slices, then back at Luca. Safety still felt temporary in her body, a learned reflex that might take years to unlearn. But the structure around her was real, documented, and chosen. "You may," she said. He stepped inside and closed the door softly behind him. "Do you understand me?" he asked, the old dominance test reshaped into something gentler. "If you ask for distance, I give it. If you ask for help, I'm already moving. No decisions over your head, ever." Ava held his gaze, steady in a room that was finally hers. "I understood that before you asked."